look right now is beatable. I think that's how we should be looking.
Quarters, he will force one, and infiltrated the swing back from his steps. It all worked perfectly for Winter.
Honestly, I think the competition this year has been pretty weak compared to other years.
On the spike, but nerve! Great shots on the BCJ as he runs away. Perfect read, and now it's Pancakes to just enter!
We're one of those teams that likes to do crazy all the time. We're going to have some crazy plays this year.
We are really trying to dominate this season when it comes to the end of it. Our way, the core way.
The defuse is halfway, and TSM know they have to fight through this. This might can be touch needed. Thanks for the timing.
I'm excited to transition to a new role. Mechanically, I feel like this team is probably one of the better teams in NA.
I can confidently say that we think we're the best team in Challengers, and we try to prove that in this Split 1 playoffs.
You know what? I'm good with it. I'm getting old by it. Spray popping is down. They pick me up here with the overheal redux with the ace.
Teams are getting overconfident. I think people don't understand that at the end of the day, what's going to matter is when we get to playoffs and when we actually play the elimination game, and we're going to win it all, that's for sure.
Doesn't really need to do much work, though, now that that's toxic. Corona doing a good job holding it down on site. Zeldas is reinvaded. Here's that operator. He is looking good as ever. You don't need to do that, dude. You have 4 players on your team.
We think most of the teams are horrible, so we're just going to dominate and just win everything.
Welcome to day 3 of the playoffs for Valorant Challengers North America. Eliminations up ahead and a playoffs bracket that no one could have expected. And I'm so pumped to get into today. My name's Sierra Dawn, joined here by Dan and Ash. Dan, what do you make of this craziness we got going on? I never could have predicted how the last couple of days have shaken up.
It's crazy. And we always talk about it. We always talk about how challengers, they always have these crazy upsets that we're not really thinking teams at the bottom are going to start winning. But, oh my God, TSM losing, Winthrop winning. That's the one that I was like, okay, guys, what is going on?
It's just been insanity, Ash. I mean, the results are one thing, but even what's happening out in the server, like, I don't even know what to expect anymore. And last 2 days, at least there was second chances, but no forgiveness today.
No forgiveness today is the big thing, right? The elimination being the first round of the lower bracket, that's a lot of pressure to be on the shoulders of these teams. And when you consider yesterday's matches, like Dan was talking about there, I think it was just shocking to see how good WU looked. But TSM also just not quite looking like themselves, I think, when it came down to those fundamentals. Now finding themselves facing up against a core that honestly looked pretty decently strong against Cubert Academy. That was a close series.
It really was. It was one that there was a minute I thought they were going to do it. I thought they were getting the upset there, but that upset for Winthrop University to find themselves in the upper semis is incredible. And I feel like there's a couple of different reasons here, Dan, why we maybe have seen such weird things. Some teams qualified earlier than others. Maybe they're a little rusty. Maybe they just underestimated the teams and the work we've put into the playoffs. But looking at today, I think this is going to be the real test with elimination on the line.
Yeah, I feel like for some teams, it was definitely kind of undermining how good the other teams really are. I feel like that's how we felt for Winthrop at the beginning. When we look at the group stage, we were like, okay, sure, they're winning, but are they winning against these strong opponents? And when you win against TSM, okay, you made your statement. And then as you were saying, teams that maybe were a little bit rusty, obviously we're talking about rankers here. This NV team that is coming in as the team that made it to playoffs first. They were 4-0. They were chilling for some time, and now we see them lose that first match. So it's just, I really don't know what's going on. It's insane.
That's a match we'll get to see later. First up, this TSM versus QOR. This TSM that we didn't frankly think that we were going to be covering today, because we thought, or at least I thought, I can't speak for you guys. I don't know. This is just insanity. And I think that it's really interesting to talk about this TSM team, because Ash, when we look at the core of this team and we look back at what kind of happened with the org in the last year, there always has been those ups and downs. And when we had Vora and Recoil come into the squad, I kind of thought those up and downs were gone. But I'm kind of thinking again after yesterday's series, like what's happening here?
Yeah, I think it raises quite a few concerns, right? Because the core of GMD, Seven, and Sim are a very experienced core of players within the Valorant scene. Them being around since like the very beginning of Valorant for the most part, and then you've got Vora who stepped into the IGL role, brand new to it, heading into this TSM roster, and you know he's having great performances, I think, on this squad while being a new leader and learning this new role to alleviate that responsibility from GMD, something that we've talked a lot about, I think, throughout this split. And then Recoil, one of those rookie players that have come in and has been someone that I think people have had their eyes set on. But in certain moments, it feels like you see, you know, the glimmers of brilliance from this squad when everything is going right. But then you also see moments where they are falling apart, where they don't have some of those fundamentals down pat, where you would expect that from them at this late in the stage.
Yeah, talking about that loss to Winthrop University, you're talking about moments of brilliance. And I thought that there was a lot more of those than anything else throughout the season. I thought with these changes, the team and any concerns had kind of been fixed. But then I look back at this loss versus Winthrop. It was a 3-map series. We did get a strong bind out of the team, Dan. I'll give you that. But when Winthrop University was shooting back, like, just what happened there?
Yeah, it just seems like it was all the momentum that Winthrop had at the end. And I stay with something that we just heard some of the players talk about before we went live. And you're coming into these matches, you're a little nervous, a little anxious about how it's going to be played out. And when it gets to your head, it gets so difficult. And it seems like that's something that happens to TSM. I mean, again, they've had so many great moments. We talk about the core that made it to Ascension last year. We talk about how good they've been. I mean, the only match that they lost in the group stage was against the #1 team that we had back then, which was Rankers. But they had these moments where it just seems like they lose the grip of the game. They're not playing their own game anymore. And for Winthrop, this is great because this is a Winthrop that is always adapting on the fly, that is always willing to get a little silly, a little risky. And so they just capitalize from this completely. I think TSM's still amazing, though. I still think they're the #1. In my head, this is my #1 team to win playoffs. And I know that's crazy, but it's just, they're so good.
I do think that they're a squad that can definitely do it. But again, it just, like you were saying, it comes down to that mental, that pressure that's on them. And I feel like a loss up against Winthrop yesterday is a concern for me as far as, you know, maybe the confidence that they have going into today's match. I need to see them really being able to focus on their own game like you're talking about there, Dan.
And I don't think you're crazy, Dan. I think that if we get a strong result today, I think you're totally valid. So, but that's going to be the if of today after yesterday. And I will say too, because I know we're talking a lot about like what happened to TSM. Like, I will give credit to Winthrop University where it's due, because they definitely have elevated going up into this. And yet again, one of those, you cannot disrespect any team going into this. But let's start talking about a couple of these players and that impact from yesterday. Vora, Dan, is somebody that we talked about a lot. The impact on the team, this young IGL, and want to compare and contrast and use the opportunity to talk about Seven as well.
Well, when you talk about why TSM is so good and why I place them in #1, #2, even for the teams that we have in playoffs right now, it is because of this support lineup that they have. Vora and Seven are amazing players. They sometimes they share a little bit of the same agents as well. The agent pool is very similar, but locking into these initiators, they've made such a big impact. I like how TSM is always bringing something just slightly different to the table, right? So you're not seeing these crazy compositions that we might see, for example, for Winthrop and some maps. You're seeing the standard, plus maybe you want to add the Yoru, and then maybe you need a little extra support with that initiator. I think Seven and Vora are just the best that we have in Challengers right now when it comes to being there for your team, being there for your duelist, and also being there for yourself and having those individual plays.
Yeah, it reminds you a little bit of, I think, like Shopify Rebellion Gold back when they had Fluorescent on the team, right? When you have a duelist like Sim, you want your initiator players who are looking to set up that star player to, you know, not just be able to like pop off as far as being able to, you know, follow up for those trades and help them close that gap, but that space creation has been so important. That's such a big win condition here for TSM. I think Sim did his job yesterday up against Winthrop with the help of Vora and Seven. Just wasn't maybe able to have as flashy of a performance as we typically see from him. But again, it all falls back down to all of these pieces of the puzzles coming together. And I want to say even Vora and Seven were two of the main reasons that even some of those maps were as close as they were up against Winthrop yesterday. Without some of their really big impact moments, those clutches that we saw coming out from them, it could have been quite a different story.
And we'll need to see that impact today going up against Core. Because for a TSM that we're talking about, oh, this loss yesterday was a little bit uncharacteristic. For Core, it was a match that was extremely, extremely close. They were up against Qbert Academy. They almost got that upset. So even though if you just go by CD and everything else, they look like the underdog, Ash, with what we've gotten to see, this could actually be really close. Core have been looking clean despite that loss.
Yeah, they have been. I think, you look back at their matchup against Qbert Academy, that 2-1, and you had, Haven was this, what was it, like a double, quadruple, or double, triple overtime map, that 16-14. It was a loss for Core, but there was a world where they could have initially taken that map pick. And I think that you look at this squad going toe-to-toe with a team like Qbert Academy that is also touted to be like one of the top 3 teams, I think, within VCL as far as expectations go from the top of this split. It tells you a lot about how they've grown and how they've improved, I think, as a roster. And I feel like on that squad too, every single player has this opportunity to be flashy given the right moment.
It's flashy, and then some of these moments, like, this was such a weird series. First, you have that triple OT, but there would be moments where Core had absolutely no business winning the round. You get these clutch moments coming on out, and a real testament to the team being able to stay calm in these moments, trust in themselves and their abilities, and go up against some of these top players that we have here in tier 2. And Dan, like that Haven, the fact that it went to that overtime, that could have been a series win there if that had just been gone a slightly different way, considering they then upset Qbert Academy on the next map pick.
Yeah, it was a back and forth between the two. And I mean, if we talk about that map specifically as well, it seems like Core were finally getting that momentum. They started a little bit slower into that map. They were able to get a few runs in the second half. And then it was just a back and forth that they couldn't really close out. The thing, though, for me is, I don't think this is a surprise. I didn't expect Qbert Academy to absolutely dominate Core. Core is a really good team. And also Qbert Academy has had some really close matches since the first one that we ever saw from them. It was a 10-2 comeback. So for Core, it's just, this is a team that can put up a fight no matter who they're facing. I think it's just they are they adapt depending on who they're playing against. And so we're seeing this different flashy plays that you guys were talking about from Timotino specifically, but also you see it from Logan, you see it from Darkest, these players that we've heard of for so long that are very, very good individually. I just want to see more of, okay, what defines Core in the match today?
I mean, I love that you call out Timotino, because Timotino, when we did that head-to-head Timotino versus Redux, Timotino being, the newer of the two, Redux being this person that's obviously so sought after, that the roster for Qbert was built around him. To then see Timotino not just go toe-to-toe Ash, but really be able to shine was amazing in that matchup. And again, a testament to this Core squad is really good.
Yeah, it really is. I think that with Timotino as well, as not only is he fragging out, given those opportunities, and you see a lot of multi-kills coming out from him as well. I know he was popping off with 3Ks when it came down to that Qbert matchup, but you also consider, again, that backline that we were talking about, very similar story to what we were talking about with TSM. You've got Darkest and you've got Logan setting him up so well. And I think Darkest specifically comes to mind too, because this guy takes a lot of risks. So you'll have Timotino actually going in, making that space thanks to Darkest's utility. But then Darkest, honestly, he's like going in, he's ready to frag. He's honestly usually getting a first pick off of Timotino, either dashing or satcheling in as well. And I think that's how it all comes together there for Core, is that spacing there is really nice from them.
I'm already excited for the Darkest breach attack op that we keep seeing him come out with. It cracks me up every single time. But to pivot the conversation to difference makers in the match, of course, the kills and everything, that is huge. But I want to talk about the IGLs going into this. And I think this is also really cool because on one end for TSM, you have Vora, who is this young IGL that we're seeing get better every time. And then for Dan on the opposing end, Core, Nerve is someone who we've seen around so often. Like when you talk about someone with this experience, well, that encapsulates Nerve right here.
It's great because these are some of the players that we've highlighted individually because of their performances in the group stages. We talked about how the controllers have been having such good impact and such a great impact so far in Challengers, and Nerve is the reason why we're talking about it. And for Vora, I just like it too because when I thought about TSM last year, I was just thinking GMD, IGL, GMD, IGL, and then they were kind of switching, going back and forth with the roster that they had back then. So now seeing Vora as like just really refreshing into what he's able to bring in the IGLing, but also the fragging department. He's definitely one of the best IGLs that we have so far in playoffs.
Yeah, so TSM very lucky to have Vora, QOR very lucky to have Nerve, and I think that this is going to be a really, really close matchup. At least it is on paper. How things have actually turned out has been literally anyone's guesses. It's been chaos over here. But let's go to the map picks and bans, see if that solidifies things in any which way of order. I think for myself, looking at this, all right, this is literally best map core, best map bind, and then split. Ash, thoughts?
I think that, you look towards this map pick ban, and when you go, I think the later into the map pick ban, you might lean a little bit more towards TSM. To be fair, though, QOR, I think, have had decent but also mixed results on split as well, losing to teams like Blue Water and Trust and Plug, who have been decent in their own right. But you look towards, I think, focusing back in on Haven, that's where you get kind of nervous for TSM. They had a really strong start initially up against Winthrop, but weren't able to close that map out. It's been close for them. I do think that overall, though, that this does lean a little bit more in TSM.
Yeah, the first map is like, oh, okay, this is good for QOR. But then I look at the bind and TSM, even when it was a rocky series up against Winthrop University, the bind was the shining moment. And then I look at the split, and then that's when I get a little nervous for QOR again. So I think as long as like too much momentum isn't lost in the beginning part, then this should be good for TSM. But QOR, I mean, they've just been ramping up. So if they can fix the split just a little bit, or we see the turnaround on bind, who knows?
Well, I think Haven's actually going to be a good map for TSM. When we look at the compositions, the only difference here is the duelist, where Sim is going to be on the Yoru as we've seen before. Everything else remains the same, and they're starting on the attacking side. This is the stronger side as well. So what you're looking at this map that seems to be good for QOR, going on the defensive side as well, playing their strength too. But the Yoru for Sim is so disruptive on the attacking side, which is what we saw when they played against Winthrop. The few runs that they were getting and when they looked the best, that is exactly what was happening behind the scenes. And yeah, we highlighted the initiators, but I think something that TSM has that I don't see as much from QOR and Timotino is that Sim is making a lot of this individual plays on the Yoru and doesn't always need that backline support. While on the other side, I feel like Timotino is more of a team player, everybody playing together, everybody going in together. And so that's going to be a big difference, and that's why I think TSM should have the upper hand. Maybe take it 2-0.
All right, I'm hearing a lot of like, all right, TSM this, TSM that. Let's pull up the predictions, see exactly how this is varying. I know for myself, I said that it was going to be TSM. I think this will be a great series. I couldn't quite bring it in myself to go for QOR. Ash, you're going to go against the grain here. Are you still feeling as confident in that pick after that map pick and ban?
I think that I do feel pretty good about it. I'm going to be honest. It was a really, really tough choice between TSM and QOR. I think that watching TSM struggle to close out a couple of those maps yesterday, though, made me lean a little bit further in QOR's direction. I feel like QOR, despite taking that loss up against Qbert, because it was such a close matchup, I do think that there is that potential to have some of that momentum behind them. Because when you look at QOR, when you watch them play these games, even when they're down in rounds, it can be, a double-edged sword, but they still play very confidently with the risks that they're taking as a squad. And I feel like that mental is what I lean towards a little bit more as far as seeing them in favor for this matchup, because I find that for TSM, once they start to lose that momentum, I think it can be really difficult to get that back unless one of their players manages to have some sort of really insane pop-off moment that kind of hypes the team back up. Otherwise, I don't find that they're this team that can always kind of slow roll that momentum back into their favor. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me in today's series, this is definitely a tough one, but I think when I look at a couple of these top teams that have found themselves in this lower bracket, teams like TSM and Envy, I'm looking at the turnaround going into today because I don't think their recent results are reflective of the growth we've seen throughout the regular Swiss stage. So if TSM does falter here, that's a lot of questions for stage 2, but I think that I don't know. I think that maybe we've had the hard conversation last night. We're been able to hit the server today, and it should be good. So I'm looking forward to a great series either way. One that is going to have to wait just a couple minutes because I am getting word that there is a computer issue. So we're going to be taking a quick break. On the other end, it's going to be TSM and QOR. So be right back. Hey everyone, and thank you so much for your patience. Due to a PC issue for QOR, unfortunately, not all members available to be playing for the first match, so it is going to be ruled as a forfeit, and TSM are going to be taking that. Now we're looking at a substitute situation for map 2, which should be sorted shortly. So just a little bit longer to wait. Thank you all for waiting. We'll see you real soon.